During a car ride with his son, a millionaire witnesses a scene he will never forget. A girl rummaging through the trash for food. Driven by an impulse he doesn't even understand, he decides to take her to his mansion, offering her shelter and food. As she enters, the girl stares at a photo on the wall, and her whole body trembles. There was the face of the mother she never forgot. If you love good stories, please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're from. We continue. The gleaming black Bentley glided through Manhattan's busy streets, cutting through the frantic energy of New York City like a shark through water. Inside the climate-controlled luxury, Richard Blackwood adjusted his custom-tailored Armani suit while absent-mindedly checking the stock market updates on his phone. At 55, with salt-and-pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that had stared down countless business rivals, he had built Blackwood Industries into a real estate empire that dominated the East Coast. "Dad, can we stop for ice cream?" asked his 14-year-old son Ethan, looking up from his smartphone. The boy was the spitting image of his father, same strong jawline, same calculating eyes, but with youth's softness still clinging to his features. "We're already running late." "For the Henderson meeting," Richard replied without looking up. "Princeton can't wait forever, even for us. Besides, didn't your nutritionist say to cut back on sugar?" Ethan sighed dramatically, slouching back into the buttery leather seat. "It's just ice cream, Dad. One scoop won't kill my lacrosse career." Richard finally glanced up, his expression softening slightly at the sight of his son's disappointment. These rare moments together were precious, even if they were just traveling between business meetings. Since the divorce 3 years ago, Richard had thrown himself even deeper into his work, and Ethan split his time between Richard's penthouse and his ex-wife Victoria's estate in the Hamptons. "Fine. James, pull over at that place on 53rd, Richard instructed his driver, who nodded silently. The Bentley slowed as it approached a red light at a busy intersection. Through the tinted windows, the contrast between their world and the one outside was stark. Designer boutiques with armed security guards, well-dressed professionals hurrying to meetings, tourists with shopping bags from luxury stores. But it was something else that caught Ethan's attention. "Dad, look," he said quietly, pointing toward the sidewalk. Richard followed his son's gaze. Near a service alley between two high-end stores, a small figure was hunched over, digging through a garbage bin. It was a girl, perhaps 11 or 12 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes so dirty they were nearly grey. Her thin arms moved methodically as she searched for anything of value or sustenance. "That's horrible," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with genuine shock. Despite attending an elite private school where community service was mandatory, he had never witnessed real poverty up close. "She's just a kid." Richard stared, something stirring within him. He wasn't a sentimental man. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford in business. Yet the sight of this child, alone and desperate in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, struck a chord he thought had been silenced long ago. "James, pull over," he commanded, his voice unnaturally tight. "Sir?" The driver seemed confused, as they were nowhere near an ice cream shop. "Pull over now." The car eased to the curb about 20 feet from where the girl was still rummaging. She glanced up momentarily, her eyes narrowing with suspicion at the luxury vehicle before returning to her task with even greater urgency. "Stay here," Richard told Ethan, who was already halfway out the door. "But Dad..." "Ethan, stay." Richard stepped out of the car, immediately feeling out of place on the sidewalk in his $5,000 suit. He approached the girl slowly, conscious that he must appear threatening to her. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. She was even smaller than he'd thought, painfully thin, with dark smudges under wary eyes that looked both too young and too old simultaneously. "Hello," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. The girl froze, her hand still inside the garbage bin. She didn't respond, just stared at him with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. "Are you hungry?" Richard asked, keeping his voice neutral. She still didn't speak, but her eyes flicked to the Bentley and back to him. Her posture shifted slightly, ready to run if necessary. "My son and I were about to get some food. You're welcome to join us." Richard surprised himself with the offer. This wasn't like him at all. The girl's expression turned from wariness to outright suspicion. "I don't go with strangers," she finally said, her voice raspy, as if rarely used. "Especially not rich ones in fancy cars." Richard couldn't help but respect her caution. "Smart girl. How about this? We buy food, bring it back, and you can eat it right here. No getting in cars, no going anywhere." She considered this, hunger clearly warring with distrust. Meanwhile, Ethan had ignored his father's instructions and approached them. "Hi," he said with an easy smile that revealed the expensive orthodontic work his father had paid for. "I'm Ethan. That's my dad." The girl's eyes darted between them, noting the resemblance. "Why do you care?" she asked bluntly. It was a fair question, and one Richard wasn't entirely sure he could answer. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said eventually, though the words felt hollow even to him. The girl actually snorted at this. "Right." "I'm getting a burger and fries," Ethan interjected. "Want some?" Food seemed to be the magic word. The girl's resolve visibly weakened. "Maybe." "What's your name?" Ethan asked. After a long pause, she answered, "Lily." "Is that your real name?" Richard asked, earning himself a sharp look from the girl. "Today it is," she replied evenly. Richard couldn't help but smile at her spirit. Despite everything, there was a fierce intelligence in her eyes. "Fair enough, Lily. Wait here." They returned 15 minutes later with enough food for 3 people. Lily was still there, though she'd positioned herself with a clear escape route, her back to the wall. She accepted the paper bag cautiously, examining its contents before taking a small bite of the burger. Once she determined it was safe, she began devouring it with an intensity that was difficult to watch. Richard and Ethan stood awkwardly, uncertain what to do next. The girl clearly needed help beyond a single meal. But what was the protocol here? Call social services? Give her money? Neither seemed adequate. "Where are your parents?" Richard finally asked, as Lily finished the burger and started on the fries. Her face hardened instantly. "Don't have any." "Everyone has parents," Ethan said, then winced at his own naivety. "Not everyone has parents who want them," Lily replied, with a shrug that was meant to appear casual, but couldn't hide the pain beneath. Richard felt something twist inside him. "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight? A shelter, maybe?" Lily's eyes narrowed again. "I get by." "She can come home with us," Ethan said suddenly. "We have like 10 empty bedrooms." Richard stared at his son in surprise. "Ethan, we can't just—" "Why not? You always say that with great wealth comes great responsibility." "I believe that was Spider-Man," Richard replied dryly. "Actually, it was from the Bible first," Lily unexpectedly interjected between bites. "Luke 12:48, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded." Both Blackwoods turned to stare at her. "I spent some time at a church shelter," she explained with another shrug. "They're big on Bible study." Richard felt a strange sensation he eventually identified as shame. Here was this child, quoting scripture while digging through garbage for food, while he was worried about being late to a meeting about acquiring more property he didn't need. "Lily," he said, making a decision that would forever alter all their lives. "My son is right. We have plenty of room. Would you like a warm shower, clean clothes, and a proper bed for the night? No strings attached. If you want to leave in the morning, I'll bring you right back here." The girl studied him with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "Why would you do that?" Richard didn't have a good answer, just a feeling he couldn't explain. "Because I can," he said finally, "and because maybe I should." Lily looked at the remains of her meal, then at the alley that had been her hunting ground, and finally back at Richard and Ethan. Something in her calculations shifted. "One night," she agreed cautiously, "and I keep the door locked." The drive to Richard's Upper East Side penthouse was silent and tense. Lily sat as far from both Blackwoods as possible, in the spacious back seat, her small backpack clutched protectively against her chest. She stared out the window, watching as the city landscape transformed from the commercial district to the increasingly exclusive residential neighborhoods. Her face betrayed nothing, but her knuckles were white from gripping her bag. Almost. "There?" Ethan said, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Our place has the best view of Central Park." Lily didn't respond, just continued gazing out the window with the same unreadable expression. When the Bentley finally pulled up to one of Manhattan's most prestigious addresses, Richard noticed how Lily's eyes widened slightly before she quickly masked her reaction. The doorman greeted them with practiced deference, though his eyebrows rose fractionally at the sight of the disheveled girl accompanying the Blackwoods. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood, young Mr. Blackwood," he said smoothly. "Evening, Frank," Richard replied. "This is Lily. She'll be staying with us tonight." If Frank had questions, he was too professional to ask them. "Of course, sir. Welcome, Miss Lily." The girl flinched slightly at being addressed, directly, but managed a small nod. The private elevator whisked them directly to the penthouse level. When the doors opened, Lily couldn't suppress her gasp. The entryway alone was larger than any room she could remember being in, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering Manhattan skyline and the dark expanse of Central Park below. "Home, sweet home," Ethan said with casual pride, oblivious to how overwhelming the space might be to someone like Lily. A tall, elegant woman with perfect blonde hair appeared from one of the hallways, her expression shifting from welcome to confusion when she spotted Lily. "Richard, you're late for—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes fixed on the bedraggled child standing awkwardly in her immaculate foyer. "Diane, this is Lily," Richard said to his housekeeper. "She'll be staying with us tonight. Could you please prepare the blue guest room and find some clothes that might fit her?" Diane Simmons had been with the Blackwoods for over a decade, managing the household with quiet efficiency. She had seen many strange things in her years of service to the wealthy, but this was unprecedented. Nevertheless, she recovered quickly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Would Miss Lily like something to eat first? Dinner was prepared hours ago, but I can heat it up." Before Richard could answer, Lily spoke up. "We already ate. Thank you," she added after a brief hesitation. Diane nodded, her professional demeanor intact despite her obvious curiosity. "Then perhaps a bath. I can show you to your room." Lily looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay. Diane runs this place better than I do. You can trust her." After a moment's consideration, Lily followed Diane down a hallway, still clutching her backpack. "Did you cancel the Henderson meeting?" Ethan asked once they were gone. Richard checked his watch and sighed. "I need to make that call and explain to Princeton why my son won't be touring their campus today." "They'll understand," Ethan said with the confidence of someone who had never faced serious consequences for his actions. "It's not like they're going to reject me just because we missed one meeting." Richard rubbed his temples. "That's not the point, Ethan. We made a commitment." "And we made a better choice," his son countered. "You always say business is about prioritizing." "This isn't business," Richard muttered, though in truth he wasn't sure what it was. Charity? Impulse? Temporary insanity? He pulled out his phone to make the necessary apologies. Meanwhile, Lily stood frozen in the center of what Diane had called the blue guest room, a space larger than most apartments, decorated in varying shades of blue and cream. The king-sized bed looked like it could comfortably sleep 5 people. A sitting area by the windows featured plush armchairs and a small writing desk. The ensuite bathroom contained both a deep soaking tub and a separate shower stall with more knobs and buttons than Lily had ever seen. "The closet has some clothes that might fit you," Diane said, opening a door to reveal a walk-in closet larger than the room at the last shelter where Lily had stayed. "These belong to Mrs. Blackwood's niece who visited last summer. She's a bit older than you, but they should work for now." Lily's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Blackwood." "Ms. Harrington," Diane corrected herself. "Mr. Blackwood's fiancée, they're to be married next spring." Lily nodded, filing away this information. "There are fresh towels in the bathroom. Use whatever you need. The intercom by the bed connects to my quarters if you require anything during the night." Diane paused, studying the girl with kind but assessing eyes. "Would you like me to wait while you bathe? I could wash your clothes." Lily tightened her grip on her backpack. "I can manage." Diane nodded, respecting the girl's need for privacy. "Very well. Breakfast is served at 7, but you can come to the kitchen any time you're hungry. Do you need help with the shower?" "Controls. They can be a bit complicated." After a quick tutorial on the shower's many functions, Diane left Lily alone. The moment the door closed, Lily systematically explored the room, checking the windows. 30 floors up, no fire escape. The closet, no hidden compartments. And under the bed, nothing but pristine hardwood floors. She tested the door lock twice before finally setting her backpack down. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the edge of the bed, feeling the mattress give beneath her weight. It was softer than anything she could remember. For a brief moment, her stoic facade cracked, revealing the exhausted child beneath. She blinked rapidly, fighting back unexpected tears. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "Don't get used to it." After her shower, which took nearly 20 minutes to figure out despite Diane's instructions, Lily emerged feeling cleaner than she had in months. She reluctantly abandoned her own clothes, which Diane had quietly whisked away while she was bathing, and put on a pair of soft cotton pajamas she found laid out on the bed. A gentle knock on the door made her jump. "Lily, it's Ethan. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then unlocked the door, opening it just enough to see him. Ethan had changed into casual clothes, designer sweatpants and a Harvard t-shirt. He held a steaming mug in his hands. "Diane made hot chocolate. Thought you might want some?" Lily opened the door wider, accepting the mug cautiously. The rich, sweet smell made her mouth water. "Thanks," she said, taking a small sip. It was the best thing she'd tasted in years. "So," Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe, "where are you from? Originally, I mean." Lily shrugged. "Around." "How long have you been—" He trailed off, unsure how to phrase it politely. "On the streets," she supplied bluntly. "A while." Ethan nodded, accepting her vague answers. "Well, if you need anything, my room is just down the hall, the one with all the basketball posters." Lily took another sip of hot chocolate to avoid responding. She wasn't here to make friends. "Dad wants to talk to you tomorrow," Ethan added. "About, options and stuff." "I don't need charity," Lily said sharply. "It's not charity, it's—" Ethan searched for the right words. "It's doing the right thing, like you said, from the Bible or whatever." Despite herself, Lily felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Or whatever. Anyway, good night, sleep well." Ethan turned to leave. "Ethan," Lily called after him. When he turned back, she said simply, "Thanks for the hot chocolate." He grinned. "Any time." After he left, Lily carefully locked the door again and placed a chair under the handle for good measure. She moved to the window, gazing out at the glittering city spread below her like a carpet of stars. Somewhere out there were the streets she knew, the hidden corners and dangerous alleys that had been her world. From up here they seemed so small, so distant. She wondered if her mother had ever seen a view like this, if she'd ever stood in a room like this one, drinking hot chocolate and wearing clean pajamas. The thought created a familiar ache in her chest, a mixture of grief and anger that never quite went away. "Don't get attached," she reminded herself firmly. "Tomorrow you're gone." But as she slipped between the silky sheets of the enormous bed, sinking into its cloud-like embrace, she couldn't help wondering what it would be like to stay, to have a real home again, to belong somewhere, to have a family. She pushed the dangerous thoughts away and closed her eyes, determined to enjoy this one night of luxury before returning to reality in the morning. But in the space between wakefulness and sleep, her mother's face appeared as it always did, smiling, beautiful and forever out of reach. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rectangles across Lily's bed. For a moment upon waking, she experienced complete disorientation. The softness beneath her, the silky sheets, the vast space around her, none of it made sense to her street-trained instincts. Then memory returned. The Blackwoods, the penthouse, the one night of sanctuary. She sat up slowly, savouring the feeling of being well rested. A glance at the bedside clock showed it was nearly 9, later than she'd slept in years. Street survival required early rising, before shop owners shooed you away or other scavengers claimed the best spots. A fresh set of clothes had been laid out on the armchair near the bathroom. Jeans, a simple blue t-shirt, socks, and even new underwear with tags still attached. Lily approached them cautiously, as if they might be a trap. The jeans were slightly too long but fit otherwise. The shirt hung loosely on her thin frame. She retrieved her backpack from under the bed where she'd hidden it and checked its meager contents. A tattered paperback book with a broken spine, a small photo with creased corners, which she didn't look at but merely confirmed was still there, a plastic water bottle, half a granola bar saved from yesterday, and a small Swiss Army knife that had been her most valuable possession for protection and utility. After making the bed with military precision, another survival habit, always leave places better than you found them, especially if you might need to return. Lily cautiously unlocked her door and peered into the hallway. The penthouse was quiet except for distant kitchen sounds. She followed them, moving silently out of habit. The kitchen was a chef's dream of stainless steel and marble. Diane was efficiently preparing something at the massive island counter, while a coffee machine that looked like it belonged on a spaceship burbled quietly. "Good morning, Lily," Diane said without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Lily replied politely. She hovered at the kitchen entrance, unsure of protocols in this gleaming domain. "Hungry? I can make you eggs, pancakes, waffles, or there's granola and fruit if you prefer something lighter." The mention of all those options made Lily's stomach growl audibly. Diane smiled kindly. "How about a little of everything? Growing children need proper nutrition." Before Lily could protest that she didn't want to be any trouble, Diane was already in motion, cracking eggs into a bowl with one hand while heating a griddle with the other. "Where is everyone?" Lily asked, carefully sliding onto a stool at the counter. "Mr. Blackwood left for an early meeting but asked to be notified. When you woke up?" "Ethan is still sleeping. That boy would sleep until noon every day if allowed." Diane set a glass of orange juice in front of Lily. "Fresh squeezed. Try it." Lily took a cautious sip, then a longer one. It tasted nothing like the reconstituted orange juice from the shelters or the cheap cartons sometimes available at food banks. "Your clothes are being laundered," Diane continued conversationally. "They needed attention." Meaning they were filthy beyond simple washing, Lily translated, "mentally." She felt a flash of shame, quickly suppressed. "You didn't have to do that." "It's my job," Diane replied simply, "and I'm happy to do it." As Diane prepared breakfast with practiced efficiency, Lily studied the woman. She was perhaps in her early 50s, with silver strands threading through her blonde hair. Her movements were precise and economical, nothing wasted, nothing for show. Despite her formal role, there was genuine warmth in her interactions. "Have you worked for Mr. Blackwood long?" Lily asked. 12 years now," Diane replied, sliding perfectly golden pancakes onto a plate. "Since before Mrs. Blackwood passed away." Lily's attention sharpened. "Mrs. Blackwood? I thought he was engaged to someone named Harrington." Catherine Blackwood was Ethan's mother. She passed away when he was just 5. "Cancer," Diane added quietly. "Miss Harrington has been in the picture for about 2 years now." Lily absorbed this information silently. So Ethan had lost his mother too. It didn't make her feel any particular kinship with him. Plenty of kids lost parents, but it was useful context. "Mr. Blackwood threw himself into his work after Catherine died," Diane continued, seemingly comfortable sharing these details. "Built Blackwood Industries from a successful local development firm into what it is today. But the cost was high. He and Ethan—" She paused, perhaps realizing she was saying too much. "Well, Ms. Harrington has been good for them both." Breakfast was a feast unlike anything Lily had experienced. Fluffy scrambled eggs, pancakes with real maple syrup, crisp bacon, fresh berries, and toast with butter that melted on contact. She tried to eat slowly, with good manners, but hunger won out. Diane discreetly turned away, busying herself with cleaning up, giving Lily privacy to eat as quickly as she needed to. "If you'd like to explore the apartment while waiting for Mr. Blackwood, feel free," Diane said as she loaded the dishwasher. "Just the south wing is off limits. Those are Miss Harrington's private rooms, and she's very particular about her space." Lily nodded, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "Thank you for breakfast. It was really good." Diane's smile warmed. "You're very welcome, Lily." With nothing else to do, Lily decided to take Diane up on her suggestion to explore. The penthouse was even larger than it had appeared the night before, a sprawling luxury residence that occupied the entire top floor of the building. Besides the main living area with its breathtaking views, there was a formal dining room that could seat 20, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a home gym, a media room with theater seating, and more bedrooms than seemed reasonable for a family of 2. The decor was elegant but somewhat impersonal, like an upscale hotel. Family photos were surprisingly sparse. A few formal portraits of Ethan at various ages, some framed photographs of Richard with celebrities and politicians, but nothing that felt intimate or revealing. Until she reached the hallway leading to Richard's study. Here, the decor changed subtly. The walls were lined with photographs in silver frames, a visual timeline of Richard's life and career. Lily walked slowly, studying each image. Richard as a young man breaking ground on his first development project. Richard shaking hands with a former president. Richard and a beautiful blonde woman on their wedding day. Catherine, Lily presumed. Richard holding infant Ethan. Richard receiving awards and accolades. And then, near the end of the hallway, a photograph that made Lily stop breathing. It was a group shot at some kind of charity event, judging by the banners visible in the background. Richard stood in the center, much younger, perhaps in his early 30s. Several other people flanked him, all dressed in formal attire, champagne glasses raised in a toast. But it wasn't Richard who had captured Lily's attention. It was the woman standing just to his left. She had dark hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders, striking green eyes, and a smile that transformed her entire face. She was looking, not at the camera but at Richard, with an expression that even in this frozen moment communicated complex emotions. Admiration, affection, and something deeper that the photographer had accidentally captured. Lily's hands began to shake. She stepped closer to the photograph, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She knew that face. She knew that smile. She'd memorized every detail of it from the creased photograph she carried in her backpack, the only thing she had left of her mother. The sound of approaching footsteps barely registered. Lily was transfixed, her fingertips hovering inches from the glass, tracing the outline of the woman's face without touching it. That was taken at the Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. About 20 years ago, Richard's voice came from behind. Her. One of our first major philanthropic events after Blackwood Industries took off. Lily didn't turn around. She couldn't. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Who?" Richard moved closer, following her gaze. "Oh, you mean Rebecca. Rebecca Hayes. She was one of our brightest project managers back then. Brilliant woman." The name hit Lily like a physical blow. Rebecca Hayes. Her mother's name. The name on the birth certificate she'd found among her mother's things after she passed away. The name she'd repeated to herself on countless cold nights, like a prayer or a charm against forgetting. "What happened to her?" Lily asked, still staring at the photograph, afraid that if she looked away it would somehow disappear. There was a slight pause before Richard answered. "She left the company. Personal reasons, I believe. That was a long time ago." Something in his tone made Lily finally turn to face him. Richard Blackwood was dressed impeccably in another custom suit, every hair in place, the very image of controlled success. But his expression as he looked at the photograph was strange, a mixture of nostalgia, discomfort, and something else Lily couldn't quite identify. "Did you know her well?" Lily pressed, watching his face carefully. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps wondering at her interest. She worked directly under me for several years. She was instrumental in some of our most successful early projects. He cleared his throat. Why do you ask? Lily's mind raced. A lifetime on the streets had taught her to be cautious, to play her cards close. This couldn't be coincidence, finding herself in the home of a man who had known her mother, who had a photograph of her on his wall, but she needed more information before revealing her hand. She looks kind, Lily said instead of answering. Her smile seems real, not like in most of these other pictures. Richard's gaze sharpened on her face, then returned to the photograph as if seeing it anew. Yes, he said quietly. Rebecca always had an authentic quality about her. It was part of what made her so effective in business. People trusted her instinctively. What kind of personal reasons? Lily asked, unable to stop herself. Excuse me? You said she left for personal reasons. What kind? Richard stiffened almost imperceptibly. That's not really... Dad, you're back! Ethan's voice rang out from the end of the hallway. He was still in pajamas, his hair rumpled from sleep. I thought you had meetings all morning. Richard seemed relieved by the interruption. I rescheduled. Thought we should discuss next steps for our guest. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, but she subtly shifted away from his touch, her mind still reeling from the discovery. Have you had breakfast, Lily? Richard asked, smoothly changing the subject. Diane makes excellent pancakes. Already ate, Lily mumbled, her eyes darting back to the photograph one last time before allowing herself to be steered toward the main living area. But her heart was pounding with the certainty of what she'd discovered. The woman in that photograph, Rebecca Hayes, was her mother, and whatever Richard Blackwood had said about her leaving for personal reasons, Lily suspected there was much more to the story, much more that connected her to this penthouse, to this family, and to the man who had, by some twist of fate, brought her into his home. The living room felt too spacious, too exposed for the conversation Lily knew was coming. Richard settled into a leather armchair while Ethan sprawled on the sectional sofa. Lily perched on the edge of an ottoman, ready to bolt if necessary, her mind still racing with the implications of the photograph. So, Richard began, his tone shifting to what Lily imagined was his business voice, we should discuss what happens next. I told you one night, Lily said flatly. I appreciate the bed and the food, but I don't need anything else. Richard studied her with analytical eyes. You're what, 12? 13? 12, Lily admitted reluctantly. And clearly you don't have a stable living situation. He held up a hand when she started to protest. I'm not judging, I'm stating facts. A 12-year-old should not be living on the streets, period. Better than some alternatives, Lily muttered. Something flickered across Richard's face. Understanding. Perhaps. I don't disagree. The system fails many children, but that doesn't mean returning to the streets is your best option. What are you suggesting? Lily asked warily. Calling social services because I've been through that already. 3 foster homes in 2 years. No thanks. Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. What about family? Any relatives who might take you in? Lily's eyes darted involuntarily toward the hallway where her mother's photograph hung. No, my mom was all I had, and she's gone. I'm sorry, Richard said, and he seemed genuinely to mean it. What was her name? The question hung in the air between them. Lily studied Richard's face, looking for any sign that he already knew that he was testing her. His expression revealed nothing but polite interest. Rebecca, she finally said, watching closely for his reaction. Rebecca Hayes. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Richard's body tensed, his eyes widened slightly, and his breathing pattern altered, all nearly imperceptible unless you were looking for it. And Lily was definitely looking. Hayes, he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. That's not a common surname. From here in New York? Sometimes, Lily replied vaguely. We moved around a lot. Richard nodded, processing this information, with a facade of casual interest that didn't match the intensity in his eyes. And your father? Never met him, Lily said, the edge in her voice sharpening. He wasn't in the picture. Ethan, who had been following this exchange with increasing interest, chimed in. Dad, what if Lily stayed here for a while, just until we figure something else out? Richard's attention snapped to his son. Ethan, it's not that simple. There are legal considerations, proper channels. But you're Richard Blackwood, Ethan countered. You always say that means something in this city. Can't you pull some strings or whatever? Lily observed their back and forth with calculated detachment, though internally her mind was working overtime. The coincidence was too perfect. Her mother in that photograph, Richard's reaction to her name. There had to be a connection deeper than former employer and employee. May I use the bathroom? She interrupted their debate. Richard nodded, seemingly relieved by the momentary reprieve. Down the hall, second door on the left. Once safely locked inside the palatial bathroom, Lily quickly unzipped her backpack and removed the creased photograph she'd carried with her for years. It showed her mother sitting on a park bench, smiling directly at the camera, with a much younger Lily, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, on her lap. The background was blurry, but it was clearly Central Park, possibly not far from this very building. She stared at her mother's face, comparing her mental image with the woman in the hallway photograph. There was no doubt it was the same person. Rebecca Hayes, brilliant project manager at Blackwood Industries who left for personal reasons. Personal reasons that might have included an unexpected pregnancy. The thought sent a jolt through Lily's body. It wasn't the first time she'd wondered about her father, but her mother had always been evasive on the subject, saying only that he wasn't able to be part of their lives. Lily had assumed he was just another deadbeat, another man who'd abandoned his responsibilities. But what if it was more complicated than that? What if her father was someone like Richard Blackwood, wealthy, powerful, with too much to lose? She splashed cold water on her face, trying to clear her thoughts. She was getting ahead of herself, building castles of speculation on foundations of coincidence. She needed more information before jumping to conclusions. After composing herself, Lily returned to the living room, where Richard was now on his phone, while Ethan flipped through channels on the massive television. Sorry about that, Richard said, putting his phone away. Work emergency. Where were we? Discussing my imminent departure, Lily reminded him, settling back onto the ottoman. Richard sighed. Lily, I understand your reluctance to trust the system, or adults in general, but I can't in good conscience just send you back to the streets. It's not your decision, she countered. Actually, legally it is, he replied evenly. As an adult who knows a minor is in a dangerous situation, I have an obligation to report it. They stared at each other, locked in silent battle. Lily recognized the tactic. She'd faced off with authority figures before, but there was something different in Richard's eyes, something beyond the usual adult self-righteousness. She couldn't quite place it. Look, he finally said, his tone softening. Slightly, what if we compromise? Stay here for a week. No social services, no formal reports yet. Just a week of proper meals, a safe place to sleep, maybe some new clothes. After that, if you still want to leave, we'll reconsider our options. Lily weighed his offer. A week. In this penthouse meant 7 more days to investigate the connection between Richard and her mother. 7 days of regular meals and hot showers. 7 days to figure out her next move. Fine, she conceded. 1 week, but I keep my freedom. No locked doors, no following me around, no treating me like a prisoner or a charity case. Agreed. With one condition, Richard countered. You don't leave the building without telling someone where you're going and you're back by dark. Safety non-negotiable. Lily nodded reluctantly. Deal. Awesome, Ethan exclaimed, pumping his fist. This is going to be great. I can show you all the best places to eat around here, and there's an amazing arcade just 2 blocks away, and... Ethan, Richard interrupted. Remember that Lily values her independence. Let's not overwhelm her with plans. Lily shot Richard a surprised look, not expecting him to advocate for her boundaries. He returned it with a small nod of understanding. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the elevator doors opening in the foyer. Seconds later, a striking woman in her 40s strode into the living room. She was tall and slim, with expertly highlighted blonde hair and the kind of polished beauty that came from expensive maintenance. Her cream-colored designer suit looked like it had never encountered a wrinkle. "Richard, darling, you won't believe the morning I've had. The contractor for the Southampton house is completely incompetent, and—" She stopped abruptly upon noticing Lily. "Oh, we have a guest." "Rebecca." "This is Lily," Richard said, rising to greet her with a kiss on the cheek. "She'll be staying with us for a few days." Lily's head snapped up at the name. Rebecca. This woman shared her mother's name. The coincidence felt almost cruel. "Rebecca Harrington," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Richard's fiancée. And you are—" "Just Lily," she replied, meeting the woman's assessing gaze directly. "Lily is a friend," Ethan jumped in. "She needed a place to stay." Rebecca's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly as she took in Lily's appearance. The two large borrowed clothes, the wary posture, the unmistakable signs of a child who had been living rough. "I see," she said in a tone that suggested she saw everything. "How charitable of you, Richard." She turned to him, lowering her voice, though not enough to prevent Lily from hearing. "A word in private, please." Richard nodded, then addressed Lily and Ethan. "Why don't you two get some lunch? I believe Diane mentioned making her famous chicken salad today." After they left, Lily and Ethan lingered in the hallway just out of sight, but within earshot of the living room. "We shouldn't eavesdrop," Ethan whispered, though he made no move to leave. "Shh," Lily hushed him, straining to hear. "Completely irresponsible," Rebecca was saying, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Bringing a street child into our home without any background check, any verification of her story. She could be involved with drugs, theft, who knows what else." "She's 12 years old, Rebecca," Richard replied wearily, "and she needed help." "There are proper channels for that, Richard. Shelters, social services, which have already failed her multiple times, according to Lily." "And you believe her? Just like that?" Rebecca's voice rose slightly. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've always had this weakness, this blind spot when it comes to charity cases." "It's hardly a pattern," Richard defended. "Isn't it?" Rebecca's tone turned knowing. "First that Hayes woman and her sob stories about affordable housing, and now this girl. You have a savior complex, Richard. It's going to ruin everything." "We've built—" Lily froze at the mention of that Hayes woman. Beside her, Ethan shifted uncomfortably, clearly confused by his future stepmother's words. "That's enough," Richard said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register Lily hadn't heard before. "Rebecca Hayes was a valued employee and a friend, and this conversation is over." "Fine," Rebecca replied icily. "But don't expect me to play along with your latest rescue mission. I'm going to the Hamptons for the weekend. Call me when she's gone." Lily and Ethan quickly retreated toward the kitchen as Rebecca's heels clicked across the marble floor. They were seated at the counter, innocently accepting sandwiches from Diane, when Rebecca swept through with her designer luggage, not bothering to say goodbye. After the elevator doors closed behind her, Diane let out a small sigh. "Ms. Harrington can be particular about unexpected changes," she said diplomatically. "She's a total control freak," Ethan corrected, taking a large bite of his sandwich. "Dad says she's detail-oriented, but that's just rich people talk for control freak." Lily picked at her food, her mind whirling with new information. Rebecca Harrington had specifically mentioned that Hayes woman, her mother, and implied there was some history there, some pattern of Richard helping her. What exactly had happened between Richard Blackwood and Rebecca Hayes? And why did it make his fiancée so angry even years later? "Ethan," she said suddenly, "do you have any baby pictures? Like family albums or something?" Ethan looked surprised by the question. "Yeah, somewhere. Mom was big on documenting everything." "Why?" "Just curious," Lily said casually, "about what it's like, growing up in one place, having a history." Ethan's expression softened. "I'll dig them out after lunch if you want." Lily nodded, already planning how to use those albums to search for more clues about her mother's connection to the Blackwoods. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear: Richard Blackwood knew much more about Rebecca Hayes than he was letting on, and Lily was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost her. True to his word, Ethan led Lily to a storage closet near the library after lunch. The space was impeccably organized, clearly Diane's doing, with labeled bins stacked on sturdy shelving units. "Mom's stuff is mostly in these," Ethan said, pointing to several matching blue containers on the upper shelves. "Dad wanted to put everything in storage after she passed, but Diane convinced him I might want some of it someday." He shrugged, trying to appear casual, though Lily caught the undercurrent of emotion in his voice. "Do you remember her?" Lily asked quietly as Ethan pulled down one of the containers. "Bits and pieces," he replied, setting the bin on the floor between them. "I was only 5 when she got sick. I remember her reading to me a lot and singing. She wasn't very good at it, but she did it anyway." A small smile ghosted across his face at the memory. Lily nodded, understanding the bittersweet nature of such fragments. Her own memories of her mother were more recent but equally precious and equally painful to revisit. The bin contained several leather-bound photo albums, each labeled with years. Ethan selected one marked Family 2008-2010 and handed it to Lily. "This has some good pictures from when I was little." They settled on the floor, Lily carefully opening the album while Ethan occasionally provided context for the images. There were professional family portraits, Richard, Catherine, and toddler Ethan, alongside candid snapshots of vacations and holidays. Catherine Blackwood had been beautiful in a classical way, with elegant features and the same honey-blonde hair that Ethan had inherited. "Your parents looked happy," Lily observed, studying a photograph of Richard and Catherine. "Laughing together on a beach." "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "Dad was different back then. More, I don't know, present. Even after Mom died, he used to spend more time with me, play basketball, help with homework. Then the company got bigger and he got busier and—" He trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry. You probably don't want to hear about my poor little rich boy problems." "It's not a competition," Lily said, surprising herself with the empathy in her voice. "Different things can hurt in different ways." Ethan looked at her with newfound respect. "That's actually really wise." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise, and turned another page in the album. Her methodical search for any sign of her mother was beginning to seem futile. If Rebecca Hayes had been important to Richard, surely there would be some evidence beyond that single photograph in the hallway. "What's this one?" she asked, pointing to another bin labeled Blackwood Industries, Early Years. Ethan pulled it down. "Probably boring company stuff. Dad keeps everything." Inside were more photo albums, but these focused on the business. Groundbreaking. Ceremonies, office parties, award dinners. Lily flipped through them carefully, her heart rate accelerating each time she spotted a dark-haired woman who might be her mother. And then, suddenly there she was. The photograph showed a group of people in hard hats standing in front of a construction site. A banner proclaimed, "Blackwood Heights, affordable luxury for working families." In the center stood a younger Richard, arm casually draped around the shoulders of Rebecca Hayes. They were both smiling broadly, clearly celebrating some milestone. "Who's that with your dad?" Lily asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the pounding in her chest. Ethan leaned closer. "Don't know. Some employee, I guess." "They seem close," Lily observed, noting the body language, the genuine smiles, the comfortable proximity. "Dad was more hands-on with the early projects," Ethan said dismissively. "He knew all the employees back then." Lily continued turning pages, finding more images of her mother, standing beside Richard at various events, giving presentations, accepting awards. In one particularly telling photo, they were seated together at a candlelit dinner, heads bent close in conversation, oblivious to the camera capturing their obvious connection. "This is definitely the same woman," Lily murmured, more to herself than to Ethan. "Huh? Nothing," she said quickly, "just thinking out loud." She closed the album, mind racing. These photographs told a story beyond mere professional association. The way Richard and her mother looked at each other, Their consistent proximity in group shots, the evident comfort and intimacy between them, it all pointed toward a relationship that transcended business. "Find anything interesting?" Ethan asked as they replaced the bins on the shelves. "Maybe," Lily hedged. "Thanks for showing me these." As they exited the storage closet, Lily nearly collided with Richard, who was walking briskly down the hallway, phone to his ear. "Don't care what the zoning board says, make it happen," he was saying sharply. He paused when he saw them, his expression shifting from irritation to curiosity. "I'll call you back," he told the person on the other end before hanging up. "What are you two up to?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes assessing as they darted to the storage closet door. "Just showing Lily some old photos," Ethan replied easily. "She wanted to see what it was like growing up here." Something flickered across Richard's face, concern, perhaps, or wariness. "Find anything interesting?" He echoed Ethan's earlier question, but with an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been present before. "Your wife was beautiful," Lily said, watching him carefully. "Catherine, right? Ethan has her smile." Richard's expression softened. "Yes, she was. And yes, he does." He ruffled his son's hair affectionately, a gesture that seemed both habitual and slightly forced. "I have a few more calls to make, then. I thought we might all go out for dinner. There's an excellent Italian place nearby that I think you'd enjoy, Lily." "Sounds great," she replied, mind already working on how to get Richard alone to ask the questions burning inside her. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. After Richard disappeared into his study, Ethan received a text message that sent him into a flurry of activity. "Liam and Josh are getting a pickup basketball game together at the community center," he explained excitedly. "Dad never lets me go without arranging security or whatever, but since he's busy," he looked at Lily conspiratorially. "Cover for me? I'll be back before dinner." Lily considered the request. On one hand, Ethan's absence would give her the perfect opportunity to speak with Richard privately. On the other, she didn't love the idea of lying for someone she barely knew. "1 hour," she finally agreed, "and text me updates so I know you're okay." Ethan beamed. "You're the best." He scribbled his number on a notepad and handed it to her before dashing out, careful to avoid Diane's notice. Alone in the vast penthouse, aside from Diane, who was busy in the kitchen preparing something for dinner despite Richard's restaurant plans, Lily took a deep breath and approached Richard's study. The heavy wooden door was slightly ajar, and she could hear him speaking, not on the phone this time, but to himself, rehearsing something. "I've been thinking about what you said. No, that's not right." His voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you about your mother." "No, too direct." Lily's heart nearly stopped. He definitely knew who she was, and he was preparing to tell her something about her mother. She knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Richard called, his voice instantly returning to its usual confident tone. Lily pushed the door open to find Richard standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. The room was masculine and imposing, dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books and industry awards. Ethan went to play. "Basketball with some friends," she said, deciding honesty was the best approach. "He'll be back in an hour." Richard turned, his expression unreadable. "I see. And Diane?" "In the kitchen. I think she's making tiramisu." He nodded, studying her, with an intensity that made her want to squirm. But Lily had faced down far more intimidating situations on the streets. She met his gaze steadily. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, deciding to take the direct approach. "About my mother." Richard's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "What about her?" "You knew her, didn't you? Not just as an employee. You really knew Rebecca Hayes." For a long moment Richard said nothing, just continued to study Lily's face with that same unsettling intensity. Then, slowly, he moved to his desk and opened a drawer. From it, he withdrew a small leather-bound book, not a photo album but a personal journal. "I wondered how long it would take you," he said quietly, placing the journal on the desk between them. You have her intelligence, her perceptiveness. Lily's mouth went dry. So it's true. You knew her well. Richard gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs facing his desk. After a moment's hesitation, she complied. Rebecca Hayes was much more than an employee to me, he began, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of emotion that surprised Lily. She was brilliant, passionate about urban development that actually served communities, rather than just generating profit. She challenged me, pushed me to be better than I was. We worked closely together for nearly 5 years, building Blackwood Industries from a small family company into something that was starting to matter in this city. He paused, seeming to carefully choose his next words. Catherine and I were already having problems in our marriage when I met Rebecca. Nothing dramatic, just growing apart, wanting different things. I was consumed with building the business, and Catherine was focused on her philanthropy work. Rebecca understood my vision, shared my drive. You fell in love. With her, Lily stated. It wasn't a question. Richard's eyes snapped to hers, startled by her directness. Yes, he admitted after a moment, though we both fought it for a long time. She respected my marriage, and I was afraid of the scandal, of what it would do to the company's reputation, to Ethan's stability. But something happened. Lily pressed, heart pounding so loudly she was sure Richard must hear it. He nodded, opening the journal, and withdrawing a photograph that had been pressed between its pages. He slid it across the desk to Lily. It showed Richard and Rebecca on what appeared to be a boat, the Manhattan skyline visible in the background. They were wrapped in each other's arms, smiling with the unguarded joy of people truly in love. Lily had never seen her mother look so happy. Catherine discovered the affair, Richard continued, his voice growing heavier. She was devastated, of course, threatened to take Ethan and leave to make sure everyone in our social circle knew what had happened. I panicked. The company was at a crucial growth stage. We had investors watching, deals pending. A public scandal would have destroyed everything I'd built. Lily felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. So what did you do? Richard's eyes dropped to his hands. I made the most cowardly choice of my life. I ended things with Rebecca, told her we had to be practical. I offered her money, a lot of money, to leave the company quietly and stay away. The knot in Lily's stomach tightened. Did she take it? Not at first. She was furious, hurt, said I was throwing away something real for something artificial, and she was right. Richard's voice had grown hoarse, but eventually she agreed to leave. I thought she was just being practical too, accepting the inevitable. I didn't realize until later that she had another reason for needing that money. He looked up, meeting Lily's eyes directly for the first time since beginning his story. She was pregnant. Though Lily had suspected this revelation was coming, hearing the words spoken aloud hit her with physical force. She gripped the arms of her chair, steadying herself. With me, she said softly. Richard nodded, his composure finally cracking. I didn't know, Lily. I swear to you, I didn't know until after she was gone. She never told me. Why would she? Lily countered, anger beginning to simmer beneath her shock. You chose your company over her. Why would she think you'd choose a baby? Richard flinched as if she'd struck him. You're right. She had every reason to keep it from me. But when I found out through a mutual friend who ran into her months later, I tried to find her. I hired investigators, but she'd disappeared completely. Used the money to start over somewhere else, I assumed. Cleveland, Lily supplied automatically. Then Cincinnati, then Pittsburgh. We moved a lot. Richard's eyes widened at this confirmation. I never stopped looking, not completely. But Rebecca was smart, determined. If she didn't want to be found, especially by me. He trailed off, then asked the question Lily had been dreading. What happened to her? Lily swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in her throat. Cancer 3 years ago. It happened fast. Richard closed his eyes, pain etching new lines into his face. I'm so sorry, Lily, so incredibly sorry. For a moment they sat in heavy silence, the weight of shared loss and missed chances hanging between them. I have her smile, Lily finally said, a statement rather than a question. Richard nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. And her eyes, her determination. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking hard about something, that's all, Rebecca. But I have your nose, Lily continued, having studied her reflection in comparison to his all morning. And your hands. Yes, Richard agreed softly. You do. Another silence fell, this one charged with the enormity of their shared realization. Lily's mind was racing, trying to process everything she'd just learned. This man, this wealthy, powerful stranger who had stumbled upon her on the streets, was her father. The father she'd never known, never expected to meet. The father who had chosen his business over her mother, over her. "Did you ever wonder about me?" she asked suddenly. About the baby she was carrying. Richard's expression crumpled. "Every day," he whispered, "especially after Catherine passed away. There was nothing left to protect then, no marriage to preserve, just my own reputation and Ethan's stability. But those started to seem like such hollow excuses as the years went by. And now?" Lily challenged. "Now that I'm here, sitting in front of you? What happens next, Richard, or should I call you Dad?" The last word emerged with more bitterness than she'd intended. Richard winced, but met her gaze steadily. "What happens next is entirely up to you, Lily. But I want you to know that finding you, even in these terrible circumstances, feels like a second chance I don't deserve. If you're willing, I'd like to be your father. Really be your father, not just biologically." Lily's eyes narrowed skeptically. "And what about your precious company, your reputation, your fiancé who clearly hates the very mention of my mother's name?" "None of that matters compared to this," Richard said with surprising firmness. "I lost Rebecca because I was a coward. I'm not going to lose you for the same reason." Before Lily could respond, a commotion from the foyer interrupted them. Ethan, returning from his basketball game earlier than promised, his excited voice carried down the hallway as he called out for them. "We're not done with this conversation," Lily said quickly, rising from her chair. "No," Richard agreed, also standing. "We're just getting started." Dinner that evening was a study in barely concealed tension. They went to the Italian restaurant as planned, an exclusive place where the maître d' greeted Richard by name and whisked them to a private table in the back. Ethan chatted enthusiastically about his basketball game, oblivious to the undercurrents passing between Lily and Richard. Lily picked at her pasta, appetite diminished by the weight of the afternoon's revelations. Every time she looked at Richard, at his hands that were so similar to her own, at the nose she'd inherited, a fresh wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. Anger that he'd abandoned her mother. Grief for the years they'd lost. A treacherous spark of hope that threatened to ignite despite her best efforts to extinguish it. "Everything okay with your food?" Richard asked, noticing her distraction. "It's fine," Lily replied. "Just not very hungry." "You should try the tiramisu," Ethan suggested. "It's like life-changing." "Maybe just a bite of yours," she conceded, offering him a small smile. Despite everything, she found herself genuinely liking Ethan. He was privileged and sometimes clueless about real-world problems, but underneath that was a genuine, kind-hearted kid. The fact that he was technically her half-brother still felt surreal. Half-brother, the phrase echoed in her mind. She had a brother, family beyond just memories of her mother. "So, I was thinking," Richard said carefully, "since Lily's staying with us for a while, perhaps we should go shopping tomorrow. Get some clothes that actually fit, maybe a few other essentials." Lily bristled at what felt like charity. "I don't need—" "Actually, that's a great idea," Ethan interrupted. "We could hit Fifth Avenue. There's this cool store that has these graphic t-shirts you might like, Lily. They do collaborations with street artists and stuff." "I was thinking more along the lines of to the department stores," Richard said. "Somewhere with everything in one place." "Boring," Ethan declared. "Let's do the boutiques instead. Make a day of it." As they debated shopping strategies, Lily observed the easy back and forth between father and son. For all his complaints about Richard being distant, Ethan clearly adored his father. And Richard, despite his reserved demeanor, showed genuine affection for his son. She felt a pang of something dangerously close to longing, For what might have been, for what still might be. "What do you think, Lily?" Richard asked, pulling her from her thoughts. "About shopping?" She shrugged. "I'm not really into labels or whatever." "See?" Ethan said triumphantly. "She's cool, Dad, not some Bergdorf blonde." Richard sighed. "Fine. You can be our guide tomorrow, Ethan. Just remember that the goal is to get Lily what she needs, not what you think is cool." Lily studied Richard's face, searching for his motivation. Was this shopping trip a genuine gesture of care, or an attempt to remake her into someone who could fit into his world? Someone presentable, someone who wouldn't embarrass the Blackwood name. "I get final say on everything," she stated firmly. "And nothing expensive just for the sake of being expensive." "Of course," Richard agreed, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "It's your style, your choice." "And I want to go to a bookstore," she added, emboldened. Reading had been her escape during the hardest times, books borrowed from libraries, when they stayed in one place long enough to get a card, or sometimes borrowed permanently from little free libraries when they didn't. "Barnes & Noble," Ethan suggested. Lily shook her head. "A real bookstore with used books." "The Strand," Richard said decisively. "Best bookstore in the city. They have 18 miles of books, both new and used." The conversation shifted to favorite books and authors, revealing unexpected common ground between Lily and Richard. They both loved mysteries and historical fiction, both found science fiction a pleasant escape from reality. Another piece of genetic inheritance, perhaps, or simply coincidence. Either way, it created a tenuous bridge between them. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu for all at Ethan's insistence, the atmosphere had lightened somewhat. If not quite comfortable, it was at least civil. Progress, Lily thought cautiously. Small steps toward what exactly? She wasn't sure yet. Back at the penthouse, Ethan yawned dramatically. "I'm beat. Basketball really took it out of me." "It's the sugar crash from that tiramisu," Richard said knowingly. "Go get some sleep, champ." After Ethan disappeared down the hallway, an awkward silence fell between Lily and Richard. They stood in the vast living room, the glittering nighttime. Cityscape spread out before them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I meant what I said earlier," Richard finally broke the silence. "About wanting to be your father. Really be your father." Lily crossed her arms protectively over her chest. "What does that even mean? You can't just erase 12 years. "No, I can't," he agreed soberly. "And I would never try to replace the relationship you had with your mother. Rebecca raised you, loved you, sacrificed for you. That's sacred." The genuine respect in his voice when he spoke of her mother caught Lily off guard. She'd expected defensiveness or justification for his past actions. "But I would like the chance to know you," he continued, "to support you, to give you the stability and opportunities you deserve." "Like a fancy education and designer clothes?" Lily asked skeptically. "That's not what makes a father." "No, it's not," Richard conceded. "A father is someone who's there for school, plays and nightmares, for skinned knees and broken hearts. Someone who teaches you to ride a bike and drive a car, who embarrasses you in front of your friends and defends you fiercely to everyone else." He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture from someone usually so composed. "I've missed too much of that already. I can't get those years back, but I can be here now if you'll let me." Lily stared out at the city lights, processing his words. The sincerity in his voice was difficult to dismiss, yet trust didn't come easily to her. Life had taught her that people left, that promises were broken, that security was an illusion. "What about Rebecca?" she asked. "Your fiancée. She made it pretty clear she doesn't want me here." Richard's expression hardened slightly. "Rebecca will need to adjust her expectations. You're my daughter. That's non-negotiable. And if she doesn't adjust, then I'll have some difficult decisions to make," he replied evenly, "but none of them will involve sending you away." Lily wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this time someone would choose her first. But the ghost of her mother's heartbreak haunted her. Rebecca Hayes had believed in Richard Blackwood once too, and he had failed her when it mattered most. "I need time," she finally said. "This is a lot." Richard nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. A loaded phrase, given their history. But Lily appreciated that he didn't push, didn't demand immediate forgiveness or acceptance. "Good night, Richard," she said, turning toward her room. "Good night, Lily," he replied softly. Sleep proved elusive that night. Lily tossed and turned, in the luxurious bed, her mind replaying everything she'd learned. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up and padded silently to the kitchen for water, surprised to find Diane there, preparing what appeared to be bread dough. "Couldn't sleep?" the housekeeper asked kindly, not seeming at all surprised to find Lily wandering around in the middle of the night. "Too much thinking," Lily admitted, accepting the glass of water Diane handed her. Thinking can be louder than any noise, can't it?" Diane worked the dough with practiced movements, her touch gentle but firm. "When I can't sleep, I bake. Bread doesn't care about your problems, it just needs the right ingredients and a little patience." Lily watched the rhythmic kneading, finding it oddly soothing. "How long have you known?" she asked suddenly. Diane's hands paused momentarily before resuming their work. "Known what, dear?" "About me. About my mother and Richard." For a long moment, Diane said nothing, just continued working the dough. Then she sighed softly. "I suspected from the moment I saw you. You have his expressions, his mannerisms, but it wasn't my place to say anything." "Did you know my mother, Rebecca Hayes?" Diane nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "I did. She used to come to the house, the previous one before this penthouse, for work meetings. Always brought me coffee, remembered how I took it. Most of Mr. Blackwood's associates look right through the staff, but not Rebecca. She saw people." "That sounds like her," Lily said, throat tightening with emotion. "She always said everyone deserves to be seen." "A wise woman," Diane agreed, "and she would be so proud of the young lady you've become. Strong, smart, resilient." "You barely know me," Lily protested. "I know enough," Diane replied confidently. "I've been watching you these past days, the way you observe everything, how you're careful but not cruel, wary but still kind. Those are qualities that can't be taught. They're either in you or they're not." Lily wasn't sure how to respond to such unexpected praise from this woman who was, essentially, still a stranger. Yet something about Diane's matter-of-fact warmth invited trust. "What was he like after she left?" Lily found herself asking. Diane shaped the dough into a loaf before answering. "Broken," she said finally, though he tried hard not to show it, threw himself into work even more than before, drank too much for a while, then stopped completely, became more controlled, as if by keeping everything tightly managed, he could prevent any more painful surprises. He said he looked for her, for us. "He did," Diane confirmed. "Hired investigators, made phone calls himself. It nearly drove a final wedge between him and Catherine, who was already struggling with her illness by then." She covered the dough with a clean cloth. "But when Catherine passed, it seemed to change something in him, made him realize life is short, precious. That's when he really ramped up the search. But he never found us," Lily said, the words falling somewhere between question and accusation. "No," Diane agreed quietly. "And that has haunted him, I think. The not knowing, the wondering if you were safe, happy, cared for." Lily considered this, trying to reconcile the image of Richard desperately searching for her with the man who had paid her mother to disappear in the first place. "People can be complicated," Diane said, seeming to read her thoughts. "They can make terrible mistakes and still be worthy of forgiveness, not immediately, not easily, but eventually. Is that what you think I should do? Forgive him?" Diane wiped her hands on a towel, regarding Lily seriously. "What I think doesn't matter. Only you can decide what Richard deserves from you. But I will say this. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It hurts you more than them in the end." It sounded like something her mother might have said, one of the gentle wisdoms she'd tried to impart even during their hardest times. The parallel made Lily's eyes sting with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the water and the talk." "Any time," Diane replied warmly. "Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be busy if Ethan's in charge of the shopping expedition. Lily managed a small smile and returned to her room, feeling marginally more settled. Diane's perspective had given her something new to consider, the possibility that Richard's remorse was genuine, that his desire to be her father now came from a place of love rather than obligation or guilt. She still wasn't ready to forgive him, might never be ready, but perhaps she could allow herself to get to know him, to discover who Richard Blackwood was beyond the mistakes of his past, to find out if there was something worth salvaging from the wreckage of choices made long before she was born. As she finally drifted toward sleep, her last conscious thought was of Ethan's excited face when he'd called her cool at dinner. Her brother. She had a brother now. Whatever happened with Richard, that was something real, something that couldn't be taken away. Morning brought chaos in the form of Ethan bouncing on the edge of her bed, already dressed and vibrating with enthusiasm for their planned shopping expedition. "Come on, sleepyhead. The store's open in an hour and we need to beat the tourists." Lily groaned, pulling the pillow over her head. Is this what having a brother is like? Because I'm rethinking the whole thing. Ethan froze mid-bounce. "What did you say?" Lily's stomach dropped as she realized her slip. In her groggy state, she'd voiced the thought without considering that Ethan didn't know yet. She lowered the pillow slowly, finding him staring at her with wide, confused eyes. "Brother?" he repeated. "What do you mean?" Lily began, but was interrupted by Richard's appearance in the doorway. "Ethan, I told you to let Lily wake up naturally," he admonished, then took in the tense tableau before him. "What's going on?" "She called me her brother," Ethan said, still staring at Lily. "Why would she call me that?" Richard's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, concern, resignation, and finally, determination. He sighed deeply and entered the room, closing the door behind him. "I was planning to talk to you about this today, after we'd had some time alone," he said to Ethan. "But it seems we need to have this conversation now." He gestured to the edge of the bed. "Sit down, Ethan." Ethan complied, eyes darting between his father and Lily. "Talk to me about what? What's happening?" Richard perched on the armchair near the window, shoulders squared as if preparing for battle. "Do you remember the photograph Lily was looking at yesterday? The one of Rebecca Hayes? The employee? What about her?" "She wasn't just an employee," Richard said carefully. "Rebecca and we were involved, romantically, when your mother and I were having problems before she got sick." Ethan's brow furrowed. "You had an affair?" Richard winced at the blunt terminology but nodded. "I did. It wasn't right, and it hurt a lot of people, including your mother. It's one of my biggest regrets." "Okay. But what does that have to do with—" Ethan stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as comprehension dawned. He turned to Lily, really seeing her for the first time. "No way. Are you saying she's—" "My daughter," Richard confirmed. "Your half-sister." Ethan's mouth opened and closed several times, no sound emerging. He stared at Lily with new eyes, searching her features for confirmation of what he'd just learned. "I only found out yesterday," Lily offered quietly. "When I saw the picture of my mom on the wall, I recognized her. But how? I mean, why didn't we know about you before? Why weren't you living with us?" Ethan's questions tumbled out in rapid succession. "I didn't know," Richard admitted heavily. "Rebecca left without telling me she was pregnant. I found out later, tried to find her, but couldn't. Lily and I have a lot to figure out still." Ethan processed this for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, his face split into a wide grin. "This is awesome! I've always wanted a sibling." "You're not mad?" Richard asked cautiously. "About the affair stuff? That's between you and—" "Mom," Ethan said with a shrug that belied his youth. "But Lily being my sister, that's the coolest thing ever." He turned to her, eyes bright with excitement. "We can play video games and I can teach you basketball, and you can help me with my English homework because you're obviously super smart and—" "Ethan," Richard interrupted gently, "let's give Lily a moment. This is a big adjustment for everyone." But Lily found herself smiling at Ethan's enthusiastic acceptance. Of all the reactions she'd anticipated to the truth coming out, his immediate embrace of their newfound relationship was the most surprising and the most heartwarming. "It's okay," she assured Richard. "I don't mind." To Ethan, she added, "But I'm terrible at basketball, just so you know." "That's because you haven't had the right teacher," he declared confidently. "I'll have you shooting three-pointers in no time." As Ethan launched into an elaborate plan for sibling activities, Lily caught Richard's eye over his head. The relief and gratitude in his expression were palpable. One hurdle cleared, countless more ahead. But for the first time since discovering the truth, Lily felt a genuine spark of possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of something new, something unexpected. A family. 3 days after the revelation, Rebecca Harrington returned from the Hamptons with a renewed determination to assert her position in the Blackwood household. Her arrival was heralded by the distinctive click of designer heels across marble floors and the subtle but expensive scent of her signature perfume. She found Richard in his study, reviewing documents with an intensity that suggested they were far more interesting than quarterly reports had any right to be. "We need to talk," she announced, closing the door firmly behind her. Richard looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "Welcome back. How was the beach house?" "Don't deflect, Richard. You know exactly what we need to discuss." Rebecca perched on the edge of the chair across from him, spine straight, hands folded primly in her lap. Every inch the poised socialite, even in the midst of confrontation. "The girl is still here." "Lily," Richard corrected. "Her name is Lily." "Fine. Lily is still here. I thought we agreed this was a temporary arrangement." "No, you decided it was temporary. I never agreed." Richard set aside his papers, giving her his full attention. "And there have been developments since you left." Rebecca's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Developments?" "Lily is my daughter." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet seismic. Rebecca's composure slipped for just a moment, genuine shock flashing across her features before she regained control. "That's impossible," she finally said. "This is clearly some kind of scam. She probably researched you, found out about Rebecca, Hayes somehow, and concocted this story to—" "It's not a story," Richard interrupted. "One look at her and I should have known. She has my hands, my expressions, and Rebecca's eyes, her smile. The timing fits perfectly. I've already spoken with my lawyers about a DNA test, but it's a formality at this point. I know she's mine." Rebecca was silent for a long moment, recalibrating. "Even if that's true, and I'm not conceding that it is, it doesn't change the fact that she's essentially a stranger, a street child with who knows what kind of issues or influences. You can't seriously be considering bringing her into our lives permanently." Richard's expression hardened. "That's exactly what I'm considering. No, that's what I'm doing. Lily is my daughter, and this is her home now." "And what about us? Our plans? The life we've been building?" Rebecca's voice took on a desperate edge. "The merger between Harrington Properties and Blackwood Industries that's supposed to make us the most powerful real estate force on the East Coast? The wedding that half of New York society is already talking about? You're willing to jeopardize all of that for a child you didn't even know existed a week ago?" "If that's what it takes, yes," Richard replied without hesitation. "Some things are more important than business mergers and society weddings, Rebecca." She laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you, the man who built an empire by always putting business first. The man who sent Rebecca Hayes packing when she became inconvenient to your plans." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What happens when this girl becomes inconvenient too? When she embarrasses you at a gala, or gets caught shoplifting or whatever? Else kids like her do. Will you ship her off somewhere then?" Richard flinched at the precision of her attack, at the uncomfortable truth within it. "I'm not that man anymore," he said quietly but firmly. "I've spent 12 years regretting what I did to Rebecca. I won't make the same mistake with Lily." "So that's it? Your final decision?" Rebecca stood, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her designer dress. "You choose her over everything we've built?" It doesn't have to be a choice, Richard countered, also rising. Lily is part of my life now. If you truly want a future with me, she's part of that package. Rebecca studied him for a long moment, her expression calculating. You know I've never wanted children, Richard. It was one of the things we agreed on, that Ethan was enough, that we wouldn't complicate our lives with more kids. This is different. Lily already exists. She's not a hypothetical future child. She's my daughter here and now. Which means you've already made your choice, Rebecca concluded, slipping her engagement ring, a flawless 5-carat diamond that had once graced the cover of a luxury magazine, from her finger and placing it deliberately on his desk. I wish you luck, Richard. You're going to need it. She walked out without a backward glance, her exit as precise and controlled as her entrance had been. Richard stared at the ring for a long moment, then slowly opened his desk, drawer and dropped it inside. When he looked up, Lily was standing in the doorway. How much did you hear? He asked, not entirely surprised to find her there. Enough, she admitted. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. I was looking for you, and then I couldn't walk away. Richard gestured for her to come in. It's okay. Nothing was said that you shouldn't hear. Lily entered cautiously, glancing at the drawer where the ring had disappeared. She left you because of me. No, Richard corrected firmly. She left because she couldn't accept an important part of my life. That's not the same thing. But your merger, your wedding. Business deals fall through every day, Richard said with a dismissive wave. And weddings get cancelled. Life goes on. Lily studied him skeptically. You're really okay with losing all that? The money, the social status, whatever else she was bringing to the table? Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that Lily had come to recognize as a sign of his genuine emotion breaking through the polished exterior. Rebecca was convenient, he admitted. We made sense on paper. Same social circles, complementary businesses, similar goals. But there was always something missing. He met Lily's eyes directly. I wasn't in love with her. I was in love with the idea of her, with the neat, orderly life she represented. And now? Lily asked, perching on the edge of the chair Rebecca had vacated. Now things are messier, complicated, real. A small smile touched his lips, like life is supposed to be. Lily nodded slowly, absorbing this. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. The words were difficult to say, an admission that carried more weight than she intended. Richard's smile widened. That's worth quite a lot, actually. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, neither quite ready to acknowledge the shift that had occurred, the first tentative steps towards something resembling trust. So what happens now? Lily finally asked. Now we start building something new, Richard replied, something better than what came before. The door burst open as Ethan bounded in, already mid-sentence. Told Diane we need chocolate chip cookies for movie night. But she says we had too much sugar already today, so can you please tell her that— He stopped, noticing the atmosphere in the room. Whoa, did I interrupt something important? Rebecca left, Richard said simply. Like for another trip? Ethan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. For good, we broke off the engagement. Ethan absorbed this with surprising equanimity. Because of Lily. Because Rebecca and I wanted different things, Richard clarified. Ethan nodded, then shrugged with the resilience of youth. Okay, so about those cookies? Richard laughed, the sound genuine and unburdened in a way Lily hadn't heard before. One batch, he conceded, and you have to help make them. Deal! Ethan pumped his fist victoriously. Lily, you in for cookie duty? She hesitated, still processing the implications of Rebecca's departure and what it meant for her place in this evolving family dynamic. I've never actually made cookies before, she admitted. Ethan's eyes widened in theatrical horror. Never? That settles it. Emergency cookie lesson happening immediately. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door with the casual physicality of siblings who'd grown up together rather than met days ago. Lily allowed herself to be led, catching Richard's amused expression as they departed. In the kitchen, they found Diane already assembling ingredients, as if she'd anticipated the outcome of Richard's conversation with Rebecca. "I hear we're having a baking lesson," she said, smiling warmly at Lily. "Everyone should know how to make a proper chocolate chip cookie. It's a life skill." What followed was an hour of flour-dusted chaos as Ethan took his role as instructor very seriously, demonstrating the critical importance of cream-to-sugar ratios and the exactly right amount of vanilla. Diane supervised with gentle corrections, while Lily discovered a simple joy she'd rarely experienced, the uncomplicated pleasure of creating something delicious with people who cared about her. When Richard joined them later, drawn by the enticing aroma of freshly baked cookies, he found the three of them, gathered around the island counter, Ethan and Lily debating the merits of crispy edges versus chewy centers, while Diane pretended to take detailed notes on their very important cookie opinions. He paused in the doorway, struck by the tableau they created, not quite a traditional family, but something authentic and precious nonetheless. Diane caught his eye over the children's heads and gave him a small, approving nod. She'd been with him through the darkest days after Catherine's passing, had witnessed his struggles with Ethan, had quietly supported him even when he made decisions she clearly disagreed with. Her validation meant more than he could express. "Save." "Any for me?" he asked, joining them at the counter. "Only if you agree that chewy centers are superior to crispy edges," Ethan declared. "Absolutely not," Richard replied with mock seriousness. "Crispy edges are clearly the mark of a perfect cookie." "See?" Lily exclaimed triumphantly. "Told you." "You're both wrong," Diane interjected. "The perfect cookie has both a crispy edge and a chewy center. That's why I've been making them that way for 20 years. They all laughed, and Richard found himself watching Lily. The way her entire face transformed when she smiled without reservation, how she unconsciously mirrored his own gestures when making a point. His daughter, still a miracle he was struggling to fully comprehend. Later that evening, after Ethan had finally succumbed to a sugar crash and retreated to his room, Lily found herself alone with Richard in the living room again. The city lights created a familiar backdrop to their conversation, but something had shifted between them, a subtle easing of tension, a tentative opening toward possibility. "I've been thinking," Richard began carefully, "about making this arrangement permanent. Legally, I mean." Lily tensed slightly. "What does that involve exactly?" "I'd need to establish paternity officially, though that's just a formality. Then there would be custody paperwork, updating my will and other legal documents to include you. Eventually, if you're comfortable with it, adoption to formalize your status as a Blackwood." "My mother's name is Hayes," Lily said automatically. "I'm Lily Hayes." Richard nodded, accepting this boundary. "Of course. You'll always be Rebecca's daughter first and foremost. Nothing changes that." Lily stared out at the city, considering his proposal. What if it doesn't work out? What if a month from now, a year from now, we realize we can't stand each other? "Then we figure it out," Richard replied simply. "We adjust, adapt, compromise. That's what families do." "You make it sound so easy." "It won't be," he acknowledged. "We both have a lot to learn about each other, a lot of trust to build. But I think it's worth trying, don't you?" Lily turned to face him fully. "Why did you stop that day in the car when you saw me by the garbage? There must be hundreds of homeless kids in New York. Why me?" Richard considered the question seriously. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Something just compelled me. I couldn't drive past, couldn't look away." He paused, a realization dawning. "Maybe on some level I recognized you. Not consciously, but somewhere deeper." "That's a pretty convenient explanation," Lily said skeptically. "A little too mystical for a businessman like you, isn't it?" Richard smiled ruefully. "Probably. But how else do you explain the cosmic coincidence that out of all the streets in New York, I happened to drive down the one where my unknown daughter was searching for food? That after 12 years of separation, our paths crossed at that exact moment?" "Statistically improbable, but not impossible," Lily countered, though her tone had softened. "Random chance." "Maybe," Richard conceded. "Or maybe something more." Lily thought of her mother, how she'd always talked about the universe having its own wisdom, its own timing, how some connections couldn't be broken, only temporarily misplaced. She dismissed it as her mother's romantic nature, but now she wasn't so sure. "I'm not ready to call you Dad," she said finally. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that." "I understand," Richard replied, the disappointment in his eyes tempered by respect for her honesty. "But," Lily continued, "I think I'm ready to stay, to try this family thing. See where it goes." The smile that spread across Richard's face was worth the vulnerability of her admission. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance." "On one condition," Lily added, her expression turning serious again. "Name it." "I want to visit my mother's grave with you. There are things you should say to her, even if she can't hear them anymore." Richard's composure faltered, raw emotion briefly overtaking his features. "Yes," he agreed, voice thick. "There are many things I should say to Rebecca, things I should have said years ago." "Next weekend," Lily suggested. "Next weekend," Richard confirmed. Another silence fell between them, but this one felt different, full of possibility rather than tension, of futures beginning to take shape rather than past too painful to acknowledge. "I found a photo album in my room earlier," Lily said after a while. "One I hadn't seen before. It had pictures of my mom at Blackwood Industries events, work parties, project celebrations. She looked happy, in her element." Richard's expression softened with memory. She was brilliant at her job, fearless, could win over the most stubborn zoning board officials or community activists with her genuine belief in what we were building. "She made me a better developer, a better businessman." He paused, a sad smile touching his lips. "A better person, for a while at least." "Who put the album in my room?" Lily asked, though she suspected the answer. "Diane," Richard confirmed. "She's been keeper of the family history for years, preserves the parts I sometimes try to forget." "I'm glad," Lily said simply. "I don't have many pictures of my mum, especially not from when she was young, before me." "There are more," Richard offered hesitantly. "In storage, professional photos from projects, candid shots from company events. I never could bring myself to get rid of them." "I'd like to see them sometime," Lily said, surprising herself with the request, "to know that part of her life, the part before she was just my mom." Richard nodded, understanding the gift she was offering, permission to share memories of Rebecca, to acknowledge the complex history that had ultimately created Lily herself. "It's getting late," he said eventually. "Big day tomorrow with the lawyers," Lily grimaced. "Is that going to be awful? Or legal and formal and stuff?" "Probably a bit," Richard admitted with a small smile. "But necessary, and after that, maybe we could do something fun. Just the three of us. Whatever you want." "Whatever I want," Lily repeated skeptically. "Within reason," Richard amended, recognizing the dangerous territory of open-ended promises to a 12-year-old. Lily thought for a moment. "There's an exhibit at the Natural History Museum about ancient civilizations. Mom always wanted to take me, but we never got the chance." "Then that's what we'll do," Richard said without hesitation. "Museum, then lunch wherever you choose. Even if it's just hot dogs from a street vendor." "Even then," he agreed with mock solemnity, "though I draw the line at eating them in the back of the Bentley. James would never forgive me for the mustard stains." Lily laughed, the sound surprising them both with its ease, its genuineness. Something was shifting between them, ice thawing under the persistent warmth of shared connection. "Good night, Richard," she said, rising from her seat. "Good night, Lily," he replied, watching as she moved toward the hallway with increasingly confident steps, no longer a tentative visitor but someone beginning to find her place. At the edge of the living room she paused, turning back to face him. "For what it's worth, I think my mom would be not exactly happy about how things turned out, but maybe satisfied that we found each other eventually." Richard's throat tightened with emotion. "I hope so," he managed. "I really hope so." Lily nodded once, then continued to her room, the room that was slowly becoming hers in truth, rather than just temporary accommodation. She still kept her backpack packed and hidden under the bed, a habit of self-preservation too ingrained to abandon quickly. But for the first time, she didn't check the window locks or barricade the door before climbing into bed. As she drifted towards sleep, her thoughts turned to her mother, not with the usual sharp pain of loss, but with a gentler ache of remembrance. She imagined what Rebecca Hayes might say about this unexpected turn of events, about the fact that her daughter now slept in a Manhattan penthouse, had a brother who was determined to teach her basketball, and was forging a cautious relationship with the man who had once broken her heart. "Life takes strange turns, Lilypad," she could almost hear her mother say, using the nickname from her early childhood. "Sometimes the longest roads lead exactly where you need to go." Across the penthouse, Richard Blackwood stood at the window of his study, city lights reflecting in the glass before him. He held a small photograph in his hands, Rebecca Hayes laughing at something off-camera, her whole face alight with joy. He'd kept it hidden in his desk for years, unable to display it openly, yet equally unable to discard it. Tomorrow, he decided, he would frame it properly. Place it somewhere Lily could see it whenever she wanted. A small step toward honoring the woman who had given him the greatest gift he'd never known he had, a daughter. A daughter who might someday forgive him, who might someday even love him. A daughter who, against all odds and reason, had found her way home.